Ultramega number 1. This is my pick of the week. Gong noise. Insert gong noise. This was a fantastic surprise. I really enjoyed this book. This book has got everything in it. It's got kaiju battles, cosmic aliens, cosmic powers, crazy story, fucking Stephen King style horror, like body grotesque horror,
body horror.
Yep. And it's got a heart. I'll say this. I don't want to spoil this book at all. I don't want to give anything away at all, really. But what I'll say about this that I really like about it is James Harren establishes what you think is main characters, and then by the end of it, they're gone. And I love that. Because you can. I'll say this: you can do that and piss off a lot of readers, and nobody will pick up number 2. He did that, and I was like, "Give me number 2. Give me number 2 now. I want it
really well.
I want it now." Essentially, the premise. I'll say the premise is. So there's this virus, this Kaiju virus that is on Earth that can hit anybody at any moment. And if you get infected by it, you immediately turn into like a giant nasty monster. And so this alien race has given powers to 3 individuals that can turn into these Ultramega superhero guys. But the way they do it is they take like this eyeball, and they like infuse it into your chest. So you kind of see it on the cover. And so they turn into these, Ultramen. And one of them, I forget, one of them is like a nerd, and he, super techie. And so like in his first fight, he thought he was invincible, and he ended up getting his arm ripped off. And so from that fight on, he never fought again. And he just continued to work on like building robots that would later on be able to fight the kaiju. Then you had, kind of like a nomad kind of. Do you know the second character? I was kind of confused on that. The second guy that gets powers.
Ern,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't quite understand who he is or what he does.
I don't either. I mean, he literally says, and then there was Ern. I didn't learn much about him.
Okay, so that's
and
on
he
purpose.
says he was swallowed by responsibility. He stalked the streets by day and night before finally vanishing completely.
Yeah, so he just gives up. Like he doesn't take responsibility to fighting the kaiju.
Right.
And then you have your main character who, has a family. He's got a baby. He's basically a retired boxer who got his ass kicked in his last bout. And so then he was a janitor, and then a robot took over his job. So now he's jobless. And so he's, his job now is to fight giant monsters. What we find out is when these dudes are walking around, they can see individuals who are infected, and if they get too close to them, they actually trigger them turning into the kaiju. And so at one point he's like in a market, and he sees a pregnant woman, and he can tell that she's infected, and he's like he tries to stop her from doing something, and he activates her turning into a kaiju. And so they go out and fight.
Yeah, it's just like him. He says that him being in proximity to them, it's like if they're on the edge, then him being close just sends them over the edge, and they turn into the kaiju.
So he fights that one. It's pretty fucking wicked. So it's like the mom and the baby, and it's pretty gross. But he ends up defeating it, and he transforms back to being a human. But sometimes it doesn't work quite well, and so when he transforms, his head is just like a little too big. And so like when the cops show up and the firefighters show up, they're like, "You all right, dude? Like your head's off." And he's like, "I'm fine. It'll be back. It'll go back to normal." And he calls his wife, and his wife's like, "Yeah, I see you on the news. Is your head okay?" And he's like, "Yeah, don't worry about it. I'll have like a stiff neck tomorrow. It's no big deal."
Yeah.
But then what we find out is the body of the woman who turned into a kaiju like becomes possessed, and it's really fucking gross. Like she's got like these like worms coming out of her mouth, and like bleh, and she basically communicates to him and says like, your wife and child will see you soon. Like, beware. And as a reader, you're like, what is she talking about? We just met them. Well, we come to find out that he actually had and I'm spoiling the book. I don't give a fuck. He had a previous family, and the wife, when he gained the powers, he saw that she was on the edge, that she was infected with the child, and so he left. He fucking abandoned his family.
Well, because he knew that his powers were going to trigger them,
right? And so he leaves them, and he got the government involved and said, "Hey, put these people like way out in the country so that I never see them, and they're never, no individual with this power will come towards them, and they'll never change." Well, that didn't really work out too well. It manifested, and it got bad. It gets really bad to the point where the other two Ultramen essentially see this giant fist just explode through the city, and they show up and they're like, yo, we really don't want to do this, but you've let this fester for so long. Like, you can only imagine, like, when someone gets pushed over the edge at the beginning, how big they are. Can you imagine what's going on with this being 6 or 7 years?
Right.
And so it's like a giant ass monster. They go and fight it, and they get their asses kicked. So our tech guy gets thrown onto a skyscraper.
Yeah, impaled by like a Empire State Building.
So he's out. Ern goes Super Saiyan in Ultra mode and tries to fight this monster. He gets his ass kicked. And then our main character, ends up fighting, and he gets his ass kicked. I mean, he gets his foot bit off. And
his kid eats his leg and disembowels him.
Yep. And so he does like a last-ditch effort and he does like an Ultramega punch. And I think he's successful, if I'm not mistaken. No, he's not. I don't remember what happens to the monster, but in the end, I think he defeats it, but in the process, he gets his head ripped off. And
punched
off, and he dies. But he never transforms back into a human, so all that blood, all of that, like, everything just starts flooding the city. And when this is going on, his new wife and child are trying to escape the city, and they get caught up in the mayhem. And the mother ends up drowning in the husband's blood, but she holds her baby up above the blood until it solidifies and the baby survives. It's so, like, when I read that, I was like, holy shit. Like, there were a ton of oh shit moments in this book, but that one took the fucking cake. I was like, holy, like, that is heavy. So the baby survives, but all of our main characters, their significant others, they die. And so we cut to, I think it's like 10 years later or 7 years later. And all the tech that the tech kaiju guy was working on has become the norm. You've got robots that are now policing the streets. They have technology that can scan a human being and realize that they are potentially or infected by the kaiju virus. And so they're they're not left to fend for themselves, but they're kicked out of the city essentially. And supplies are dropped for them daily so that they can survive and not harm anybody. And then we get introduced to what looks like our new main character, which I think is the son of the boy.
Yeah, for sure.
He finds like a power gauntlet, and he's in this wasteland, and he gets, he's basically, what's the word? He's a gang shows up and is like, "Hey, what'd you find? Like, we're gonna steal it." And he goes, "No, I fight with the Ultramega," and he like puts the gauntlet on, and it powers up, and you're like, "Oh shit!" It was just cool. Like, Nathan, you've never seen any Trigger animes. It's a anime company in Japan called Trigger, but they've made multiple shows that feel exactly like this. Like the way it's written, the way it's paced, just the overall like absurdity of it is like this. The last show that I watched that they produced was called Kill La Kill, and it was about there's this thing called like life thread that every human being has, and it was basically like clothing is actually made from this life thread that's actually from aliens. And
Oh.
so it's I can't even explain it, but it's just it's super fast and raw, and like this emulates it perfectly. And it also, this book has vibes. Again, this is a show you've never seen, but I highly recommend, is Evangelion, Neon Genesis Evangelion. The way, like, how the Kaiju or the Ultramega guys were being killed totally reminded me of that anime. Like, in that show, the robots that the main characters pilot are actually humanoid. And so, like, when, an arm got ripped off, there was a shit ton of blood that would, like, go into the city, and, like, that same shit where, like, his blood flooded the city and killed people. Like, the same thing happens in that anime. It just had a lot of nostalgia for me, but I really enjoyed the book, and I loved the writing, like, and the artwork and the coloring. Like, overall, this book just had everything, and it wanted me wanting more.
Yeah, I mean, the artwork in the book, to me, this was, as far as art goes, this is definitely the pick of the week for art. Like, it's phenomenal. Obviously, like, it's super, like, there's a lot of body horror. Sometimes it could have been a touch too much for me.
Yeah, I agree.
But I wouldn't say enough to distract me from the book. I think if there's one phrase that I think perfectly sums up this book, it's a fever dream. Like, it's like it's so quick and so blurry that sometimes maybe some of the more minute details get left out because you're going so quickly that it just kind of all feels like a blur.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think James Harren did that on purpose, to sort of, like, fill in the blanks a little bit, just, like, make your assumptions about some of the less essential parts of the story, and just really focused on the meat. And I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would.
So let's talk about the art. So, like, this is one of the panels I shared with you to get you to get the book. Like, that shit's just crazy. When our main character gets introduced to becoming a kaiju or Ultramega. An example of, like, the body horror being a little over the top, and it's another panel that I sent to you, and you were like, yeah, I don't know if I'm gonna get this book. And I'm gonna show it. So just being warned, if you're not into this kind of shit, either pause the video or fast forward. But here's some of the body horror that's fucking gross. But overall, like, the fight scenes in this book are just badass. I felt like the story and, like, how things are moving, I thought was awesome. And I just liked the idea of, like, even with this family, like, did not see that coming, and, like, throwing that in there. And again, like, I cared for all these characters, and they're wiped out within, like, 4 pages. And the other thing is I really love this cover. And then today we went back to the shop, and you got cover B, and I had to pick it up.
Yeah,
dude, that is so. Who's the artist for that again? He did the Silver Surfer Black, right?
Yeah, Treadmore.
Yeah, this cover's fire too. And I had the opportunity to get the 1 in 25, and I didn't do it. And then when I went back today, it wasn't there. So either way, Ultraman #1 is my pick of the week. I cannot wait for issue 2. I am super excited for it. I did not expect this story. I thought it was going to be like a straight up kaiju story, and it's not. Like, there's so much going on in this book. So if you have a stomach more for, like, some more grotesque stuff, because that's in this book, I highly recommend this book. It is so badass.